Hello, welcome to Design Review. I'm Robert Haines, founder of Engineering Your Life, and my guest today is April Mills. I got to meet April because a friend of mine had recommended that I meet her. So it is a delight to introduce April Mills. April gave me her intro, and April is a nuclear engineer, yay for nukies, author and change accelerator who trains people worldwide to create the organizational and community change they want with what they've got right now. Whether working on complex organizations or as founder of Engine for Change, the bureaucracy hacking company, which we're going to talk about, or connecting with individuals and community groups, April is an energizing spark in an increasingly exhausted world. Two pivotal moments in April's life showed her power that we each possess to dissolve unnecessary obstacles and create bold change. Woman after my heart, April, welcome to Design Review.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
It's a delight. Well, as we discussed just prior to recording, that we're going to be talking about Engine for Change, a bureaucracy hacking company, which I love how that flows. What we want to start off with is, well, first of all, if I didn't cover anything in intro that you want to have said, please add. But beyond that, we want to know what the why is. What is the why such that bureaucracy hacking company is the answer?
Yeah, thanks. Thanks for both those questions. The thing maybe in the bio for people to know, in case you're going to look for me after this, is if you put April Mills into a search box, you might get a range of people or an outlet mall. Many of the outlet malls in the Midwest have some sort of Mills at the end. So, but if you want to find me, you put the K in. So April K Mills, and then I'll come up. So that's the
Awesome.
easiest way to find me. That's sort of my unique flair, that K in the middle. And forgive me, it's allergy season here. I'm going to have to cough for a second.
Oh, that's quite all right. I also appreciate that you gave me the K, because with that, I was able to find you. I was able to find your background, and I was also able to find your book, which I'm just really enthralled with as I'm going through the first book. I realize there's multiples, which also we'll want to mention while we're on the show. But so yay, go ahead and keep rolling.
All right. So let's see, my why. Why do I do this work? One of those pivotal moments that I mentioned in the intro there that happened to me was I thought I was going to be a regular nuclear engineer in a naval shipyard in Bremerton, Washington. And when they recruited me for a stable workload. But I started in August of 2001, and 6 weeks after I started, September 11th happened. And so I watched the shipyard struggle to deal with the rate of change going on in the world, in the shipyard, in each of the different trades. And I got curious about what was hurting people and causing them to struggle, right? Our job was to bend physics to our will in service to the Navy's mission and to respect it enough to maintain it well and safely, like it has been for now 70 years of the nuclear Navy. But people seem to struggle with figuring out how to process their work more effectively so they didn't have to work overtime, how to run better meetings, how to collaborate better. And so I got really curious about what you might call like organizational engineering and understanding what were the forces and factors involved in making meaningful work happen with less friction to accelerate results. And so my career pivoted, and it's gone through a lot of journeys and lots of stories. But it was really watching the shipyard after September 11th and wanting to do something in honor to all the people that were working so hard at doing the engineering to deliver results.
Well, I really appreciate that experience, and it has me get curious because I have my own versions of that as my career went in its path, and I ended up, engineer to life coach isn't the normal career progression, right? But it would occur to me that you would have had to have experiences in life, because that's not like a class that we take, right? That you would have had to have experiences in life that led you to have the viewpoint of looking that way, because not everybody takes, otherwise, I mean, this is one of the reasons your work exists, because not everybody takes this situation and says, hey, wait, how do I help people to work with other people and to recognize what's in the way? Were there life experiences that may have like led you to have that perspective, or is it just like a gift of yours?
Well, I would say I've always been a change agent, somebody who, saw a problem, wanted to fix it. It's what got me into engineering, really.
Fair.
But I just didn't apply it in just the specific case of like, why is the metal broken, or how do I improve the electrical system? Some people focus on those specific things, and bless them for doing that, right? The amount of detail and diligence needed to be good at any one of those things is so vital. It just ended up the problem that I saw that nobody was solving was in the organization. And so in the absence of someone else solving it, I got to work and applied my engineering to it and got really good results.
Well, I really appreciate that you're doing that. That, like I said, that's kind of what I ended up doing and what Engineering Your Life came into fruition, because, I had some transformative moments that led me there. I went through a low point in my life and had to do a lot of healing. And so I've done an awful lot of deep studying of how I work.
Yep.
And then realized in the process that I'm not alone, that those challenges existed elsewhere, and found the path to try to now do what I'm trying to do, which is apply a lot of engineering tools. As I read your book, I'm like, there's a whole lot that resonates so powerfully with me. So I'm just delighted to have a kindred spirit on the show. So okay, great. So that's the why, and I know you covered a lot of that in the book that I'm reading. Let's give everybody the title so they know what I'm talking about, because my brain's gone and I'm not.
Yeah, Everyone is a Change Agent, a guide to the change agent essentials.
Yes, and then you also have another book. Is there more than one?
The second book is Change Tactics, and the subtitle is 50 Ways Change Agents Boldly Escape the Status Quo.
Okay, I'll look forward to that once I'm almost in the concluding chapters. It's like a nail biter in a way. So I'm enjoying as well. I'm in the leadership part right now, which is like super resonant.
Yeah, love it.
So I'm really enjoying that. So let's talk about the company, Engine for Change. And since this is the project, let's talk a bit more about, set the story up so that we know this project that we're talking about.
Yeah, well, the company started actually as a blog way back in 2009 because I was helping change agents across the shipyard, and I wanted to, tell them consistent stories, or share the stories that I'd been telling consistently in a more permanent way, right? That could also scale. And so it started as a blog, and then it became a side business as people asked me to give consulting or speeches about the topics that were in there. And I carried that through as I left working for the shipyard in late 2014 and moved over to Intel Corporation, where I was there for almost 10 years. And then as I left there last year, I decided to go all in on the company, trying to bring these concepts and tactics to a wider audience of folks. I'd been helping people in specific organizations, but now I could bring these change agent tactics and bureaucracy hacking tips to more people. And it seems like it's the perfect time for this conversation, because what bureaucracy hacking addresses and what change agency solves is that feeling of helplessness in the face of current conditions and rapid change. And the current conditions for many folks at work are just exhausting. They're doing the best they can with what they have, and they're not getting the progress they want. And my big injection is, it's because you're using status quo tactics, forcing people, waiting for more money, more budget, more time, more people to show up. So it's forcing and waiting. And we have to replace force and waiting with action and agency. And I show people how to do that.
In fact, I remember rather graphically. Luckily, it hasn't been that long, and I'm lucky. I'm getting to like do the audio book, so you're reading it, And I find there's something really special about listening to a book the author reads. You get more of the feeling for what's going on. But you talked about budgets in the book, and some of the rather profound questions that you're like find yourself asking when somebody runs across budget challenges. And it's not a game. I love that what you're doing is you're like genuinely curious when you're exploring the impasses, well, the apparent impasses in the process of seeking change. And just, I thought that was such a fascinating discussion. I'm going to ask you to kind of like relive some of it here. So what are the common like pitfalls that people have? Because the budget one like hits everyone.
Right.
I don't know anyone that doesn't come across the quote unquote, there's no budget for that thing. So, you know, and I'm already getting sidetracked into curiosities, which is, this is how this show goes.
It's okay.
But because I also want to know about where you're finding this applies. So yeah, shipyard, Intel, great. Large organizations, lots of bureaucracy, makes sense. But I'm guessing that you find that there are applications to your findings in a much wider area of application.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, of course. I mean, the title of the book is Everyone is a Change Agent. So I do believe it applies to everybody. And I mean, I've got examples of using it in my own life, in community work. I tell the story of building the Beyond Accessible Playground in Bremerton, Washington, throughout that first book, Everyone is a Change Agent. But I've actually got a personal story about how I applied a lot of this stuff too, to help my son, who happens to have spina bifida, managed to get a surgery he very desperately needed in a very short amount of time. So can I tell that story to you?
Oh, yes, please relay any.
Awesome.
You have open permission to share whatever occurs to you to share.
All right. So let me set the scene for you. It's 2020, right? So everybody's, you know, locked down. Things are not the typical way they work. I'd happened to take my children, all four of them, and my son's dog with me to Wisconsin to visit my mother for a brief few weeks in the summer. And while we were there, it turned out my son was having some symptoms and he would need a spinal surgery to address those symptoms. And with neurological problems, spinal surgeries have to happen quickly or you can get permanent damage.
Yeah.
And so I talked with the surgeon over the phone because we're from the Washington area. So the surgeon was at Seattle Children's. This was a Thursday morning. And he said, well, yep, Ted definitely needs the surgery, but you know, it's going to be weeks unless you could somehow get here by Monday morning. And I had gone through this procedure with Ted several times before, but I applied my change agent skills for accelerating results to this situation. I said, we can be there by Monday, but here's what we're going to need to do. You're going to send the imaging requirements to the local hospital so you can get the blood work and the imaging. We'll get that here. I'll call my friend. She'll fly out from Seattle to drive with me. We will put everybody in the car. We'll do the amazing race version of getting home to Washington State.
From the Midwest.
From Wisconsin. So we were in Wisconsin. It's Thursday morning. I got him orders for his imaging later Thursday morning. My friend booked a ticket. She flew out of Seattle mid-afternoon. I picked her up in the Twin Cities with my kids. That night, that's Thursday night, we drove all through the night. Thursday night, had breakfast in the Badlands on our way through Wall, South Dakota. Drove on through Wyoming, Montana. I took telemed calls for pre-op appointments on the road going through Wyoming and Montana. We managed to get back to our house here in Ellensburg, Washington by early morning on Saturday. And then my husband took over and took Ted across the mountains to get a COVID test because you had to have that before surgery. And then Sunday, we got him the rest of the way ready. And Monday morning, we were there and he had his surgery. So what typically would have taken about a month, I managed to condense into 3.5 days, understanding what were the real limitations. There was imaging in Wisconsin. It didn't have to be done at their imaging center. I could take calls while in the car. And it was just a matter of getting us physically there and ready for that. And so I got the support, like my friend, the help I needed, and we managed to get it done. Amazing things you can do when you set your mind to accelerating results and hacking the bureaucracy.
Yeah, and finding out what's actually needed, because it's there's an awful lot of this the way we've always done it. You mentioned that
Yep.
as well, and yeah, I'm whether it's an engineering organization, which is what I spent my career doing, or a nonprofit, or a musical group, or a church, or a neighborhood. I mean, lots of great examples from the accessible playground. Just I love that in part because it's not what most people experience. And so you cannot say, well, no, that can't happen. Or it's like, okay, it's a completely different environment that most people are not familiar with. So I thought it was really a great metaphor, but actual working example while you're at it. Because you've had a chance now, you're speaking. Are you speaking like all over?
Yep. I've spoken in Malaysia, Germany, Poland, Mexico, Ireland, Israel. Yep, all over the place.
I love that. And I mean that speaks to the applicability and the understandability, and that, basically it's like we're all human.
Yep.
Nature of this. You knew you were gonna be like on the spot for some of these thoughts, because this is how this show goes.
Yep.
What would be the oddest, or the most, far from your origin story example of what somebody was trying to do and applied your work? Is there something, or is it largely, engineering organization type people trying to like do that, or is there some off the beaten path examples?
Yeah, there's folks across disciplines that have used this: sales and marketing, legal, finance, just about every discipline. If anything, I tone down a little bit of the engineer jargon when I'm talking with folks that are outside of the jargon space, but also happy to lean into it too with my fellow engineers.
Oh yeah.
But folks have applied it countless places, and they've also repeated things. I had a colleague who gave the book to her daughter, and her daughter went out and advocated for a playground. She saw that specific need and just replicated. So some people apply it in the same place, and it's always gratifying as an author, as a speaker, when you get that ping on social media, say months or years. I've had people I taught the class a decade ago reach out recently and say, I still use it regularly, the concepts that you taught me. So that's a really gratifying thing. Is it really does apply to everyone, and it ends up being tactics and thinking about change that they continue to apply as new changes come up.
I really like that. I could just fill this entire episode with just thoughts I have from your book, which I'm likely to just sprinkle them in. Well, in part because like I'm in the process of preparing to write my first book, and I got like half a dozen queued up, waiting to be written. Before I go there, but one of your tactics is that, which has multiple sides, is the summarization in more general form using the algebra.
Yeah.
Which, I have a fondness for that. In part because some of the stuff that you're dealing with, especially with the shipyard, there you got like security issues, and you can't reveal top secret stuff. And you transcended that by using the algebra. And for those that haven't read your book yet, wink, wink. Can you talk a little bit about that process and what you gained from it, and what you kind of like unintentionally lost from doing that, if anything?
Oh, you mean by genericizing it to like change A or organization B and all of that? Yeah. So
yeah, when I use most of the alphabet in the book.
Yeah. Yeah. What I called this change algebra is you can tend to simplify down the specific situation you're in and generalize it. And so that's what I show by doing that. So it doesn't necessarily matter that it was a sales team versus an engineering team, or that they were trying to implement a new tool or a new collaboration process. The change mechanisms end up being the same. I mean, and for those engineers familiar with stress and strain, how the stress is applied varies, but the component is undergoing stress, right? Or how the strain is created can vary, right? Torsion, bending, if we want to use all of the technical terms, but the strain is what matters. And I think that's what the change algebra helped me distill for those who understand that sort of force diagram. In my head, because I'm trained in engineering mechanics, I used to do a lot of finite element modeling, right? So you're modeling it, you're applying the forces, you're seeing in the colors in the software, where are those forces being carried? And I end up being able to see those forces in organizational dynamics. I can see where the force is being applied and whether it's working to hold something in place, move it forward, or just force to failure.
Well, first of all, I think in this show, or definitely with me, you don't have to hold back on terminology. And I may come back to the elastic plastic deformation thing, which I
Yes.
really appreciated that metaphor. But I'm curious now that you've mentioned it, is like you said, see the color of in an organizational thing. How does that show up for you? What is it you see when you see a stress distribution across an organization, for example?
Yeah. Well, what I tend to see is you'll see those, hot spots, right? Or low spots of energy or reaction. So simple example, you're in a meeting. I say I'm called in to consult with your team, and I'm watching you have a meeting. I'll tend to pick up the patterns between people. Is it somebody not making eye contact? Are they always distracted? When somebody starts to talk, are there any of those like or other noises people make which give off a sign of either disinterest, disdain, fatigue? When someone brings up a problem, do people lean in or lean out? And all of these different small factors end up giving me a sense and I can almost picture it, of where the forces at play, where the dynamics, to at least get curious, right? That's what finite element modeling is too. You apply what you think is going on and you go, that's interesting. What's true or not true about what I did? If I change these things, can I affect that pattern? And so those are the injections, those tactics that are in that second book that I help people with. Of if you don't like this pattern of let's keep going with the meeting. I show up at the meeting, there's no agenda, there's no minutes. We ramble off topic, and an hour later I leave. And now I have to stay an hour later and lose that time with my family because that meeting didn't go well. I'm frustrated. Yeah. If you want to change that pattern, there are tactics you can use to change that pattern. Spoiler, I would not suggest a corporate-wide initiative on better meetings.
There's lots of reasons for that. Back to the algebra, because I really appreciate what it does for presenting things in a neutral way. And there's an element of story that, well, actually, in a way, you sort of solve that problem because you share a lot of your personal stuff, which has a lot of story in that. But there's a thing about the story, even if it gets technical, that helps things to be more understandable and concrete. Is the way that you manage that to be able to bring in your specific stories, the things that you can share openly and vulnerably. Is that one of the ways to manage that?
Yeah, it does. But then it also is the piece where, when you're using the change algebra, one of the arguments we often get when we go into an organization is, but I'm so unique and so specific that nothing you can say applies. And the nice part when you create these containers, which is what the algebra is for people to fill in their own understanding, is it resonates with them.
Okay.
If this were writing, the example would be in a novel, I can say, and he opened the door and in the room saw his greatest fear. And you're going to fill in what that fear is. And it's going to be very meaningful for you. If I was directing a movie, I'd have to put snakes in there, or, lizards or spiders or whatever. And then people who aren't afraid of that go, oh, yeah, he's afraid of that. And it's distant. And I think that is also a piece that really helps with the change algebra, is you fill it in with your either hopes or problems, and it becomes more meaningful for you.
And you manage as a result to be really efficient about the number of things you talk about. In fact, to the point where it's I like can't categorize them anymore. I'm like, okay, I'm just letting the bush wash over me and getting a sense that I'll have to like come back to it. In some ways, in retrospect, coming through a situation, it's sort of like hindsight's 2020. Having been through something and being able to look back and say, like, oh yeah, that's clearly where we were, and I can now see the pattern there. But it's a lot harder to see it when you're actually in the face of it, especially when you're in the very human state of being activated by those people are doing the thing.
Well, part of my anecdote for that is the first Change Agent Essential, where I talk about the difference between driving people, which is using coercion, threats to compel others to change, the focus on those people, versus driving change, which is choosing the change for yourself and clearing the obstacles for others to choose it too. And when you choose driving change, you almost are choosing to not become activated by the other people's lack of whatever behavior or habit you're expecting.
Well, that would occur is easy to say, but choosing not to be activated is not always quite as simple as say, oh, I'm just not going to be activated today. When you're,
well, you're right. It's a learned habit to shift. And the thing that I talk with people countless times about is, but until you choose to break the pattern, this is your pattern. And it's not them, it's you. It's your pattern. And that, I think, is the place where we find that power. Where if I'm in a dysfunctional organization, am I aiding the dysfunction and advancing the dysfunction, or repairing it? And once I decided I was going to repair what I could with what I had where I was, I had a lot more fun, even in dysfunction.
And I really appreciate it. In fact, that one point, in a way, has become the center of my work. Because for some people, you can just say, oh, I'm just not going to do that. I'm going to go do this. But for me, it wasn't that easy. There were like obvious things that I was not able to apply.
Yeah.
I would get so many great, intelligent, insightful statements like making any decision is better than making no decision. I'm like, hey, got it. But that wasn't enough.
Yeah.
I had to do a lot of really deep work to get to the point where I could deal with why I was afraid of making the wrong decision. In fact, quite frankly, I'm still working on it. I just have a lot more insight now. But that also makes it very interesting for me, because I don't cover all the bases in the world. That's that particular thing I happen to lean on a lot. And so what I find I like to do is I like to partner with people that cover other pieces of the world. Like, with you and what your world is, if you ran across some folks that are having a hard time with that step, I'd be like, I'll help. That's work I'm willing to do. And I enjoy it because, like you, I've lived through that. You have a really visceral example in your book for that point of, I think it was your first major project management effort where you drove change, drove people, not change.
Yeah.
And learn. Did it only take that one time for you to learn?
Yeah, it was that bad. Yeah.
It sounded pretty bad, but I imagine it was probably even harder than it sounded on the book. It just, for the purposes of the folks that haven't read your book yet. Would you share a little bit about that?
Yeah. Let me set the stage. So it's the shipyard. It's few years after September 11th, right? Things are moving, but struggling. There's lots of work to be done. And I had been put in a position to be a program manager to help drive some improvements in the way we worked, to deliver more results, to get carriers and submarines back to the Navy. And I got this first bit of power, And I just mimicked what I saw everybody doing around me. So I'm, young, early 20s, trying to make this change happen with a lot of folks that were a lot older than me. And definitely from maybe a different background, different experience. But I was going to do what they always did. So I went into Outlook and I made a mandatory meeting and I conscripted them from the global addresses and said, be there on Tuesday or else. Because the senior leader had appointed me to run this program and I was going to run this program. And so the first time they came because they were curious, like, who is she and what does she think she's doing? And I showed them a big spreadsheet of all of my tasks that I wanted them to do and the dates I wanted them to do it by. So the second time they came to tell me all the ways I was wrong. And the third time they just didn't show up. So I went and tattled on them to the boss. And he's like, yeah, I'll get around to yelling at them about it. And it was just languishing. And I'm an engineer, so it didn't work. It was supposed to work and it didn't work. So I could either live with it and get angry and like kick at it, with my outbursts, or I could fix it. So I went looking for fixes. And I found several things that eventually I just distilled into this concept of driving people versus driving change. And it was like a light switch. Once you flip it, because you can't drive people and drive change simultaneously. It's an either or. And once you choose to drive change, it opens up just a ton of options.
Have you found yourself under stress, tempted to go back even though you know better?
In the biggest way where I've been tempted with that I was a hidden spot for me is I haven't done it organizationally, but I realized several years after I started that I was driving change at work and driving myself. Like the voice in my head was still driving people. You should, you have to, why didn't you, shame on you, and just really vicious. And that was the next level that I unlocked. So first I stopped doing it with other people and then I stopped doing it with myself.
I was actually going to ask that actual question because we're an organization too.
Yep.
But you speak about this topic with maybe more passion. I mean, you have a lot of passion in all of your work, but that particular point has a lot of heat to it and a lot of conviction to it that does not come from academic knowledge.
Yep.
It comes from living through the fire. And I applaud you that it was once. For me, it was like 40 years. So it's like a whole different ballgame. I have a lot more. Therefore, I have a lot of anecdotes.
Yeah. Love it.
As a result, but yeah, it's I really appreciate that stand, and that does make a difference, and it's sometimes hard for me to realize because it's clear you've distilled it down to a small number of words, drive people, drive change. What would be the significant statement that you would say represents what driving change looks like?
So the definition for it I give is choosing the change for yourself and clearing the obstacles for others to choose it too. And one of the biggest misconceptions that people have when I talk about that, in contrast to driving people, is they think driving people is hard and harsh, but necessary. And driving change is nice and light and lovely. And they usually say it with those intonations when they're comparing them. If they're not really believing me on the driving change, they're like, well, yeah, in a perfect world, we could drive change, but I live in reality. These are some of the feedbacks I've gotten over the years. And I love to use the example, it's a nuclear Navy example, of Admiral Rickover, the founder of the nuclear Navy, to say there's nothing soft and light and sweet about him, but he was all about driving change. Because he chose to create a nuclear-powered submarine and then a nuclear-powered fleet. And he cleared the obstacles for anyone else who wanted to go with him. And he didn't conscript a single person. You volunteered to go above and beyond and challenge yourself even past the expectations he gave you. in order to be part of that program. And so that's really a key misconception when people first maybe read about or hear about driving people versus driving change. They think there's this, real world of driving people and then the light, lovely world of driving change. And driving change is energetic. It does have light and life to it, but it's been used to do some very difficult things. That's another piece that I just love about it.
Well, and as I'm going through these chapters and these examples in the book, probably one of the most powerful of my experiences that's like that is there was an initiative at my employer we called Engineering Innovation Days, and in the past it had been someone's idea that you made happen, and it had its successes. And then the folks that preceded me being involved in it took it to a whole other level, with like real prizes and lots more attention and larger scope event. And then the next year there was like, okay, who's going to run this? And like almost everybody was just like taking a step back. And I'm like, and I volunteered to be in, but I didn't want to be alone. But what happened in the result of that is that the technology group ended up partnering with the Women in Engineering Resource Group. Yeah. Their officers joined in, but it was all basically like, hey, this is an opportunity to make a difference. And so there was no demand, no drive, no, this must happen. It was all like inspired for, this is something that we believe would make a difference. And then it became and it became a really big thing. And then sustaining became another challenge for us, but where it was really inspired by, okay, who wants to be a part? What do you want to do? What difference can you make? And then how do we clear out the obstacles for each other?
Yep.
Because it ended up being an organizational thing. And then how do we clear the obstacles for the participants that want to be in this, that are doing this above and beyond their job? And so, I was pretty much replaying that whole experience, which was several years of my life, on top of your thing. And I'm like, yeah, it's like this, one of the reasons why I'm on fire about this as a concept, because I have a lived experience of it too.
I love it. That's a fantastic story. And now that you have the words to describe that driving people versus driving change shift and that story of how much energy it unleashed, that's what helps it scale. Because have you run into this situation where folks are like, well, must be nice to have been there, but I can't do that. That's part of where these books and this company came out of. It works, but if you don't have the way to teach people how to do it, and again, go back to the engineering thing, right? Stress and strain and forces and the challenges have all been present. But what engineering does is help us understand how to name them, describe them, and direct them to our purposes. And that's just what I've tried to do by adding this vocabulary into the conversation. Is good people are doing amazing things, but they need a way to describe it. So it's not just, oh, that's just what Robert does, but the rest of us can't. No, Robert's driving change, and you can too.
And that's what's led to your organization. Mine, ultimately, I did about as much as I could do in a corporate environment. 25 years with that organization was a lot. It's also a nice round number. And then this drive that had been lit within me,
yep.
Like I'm really resonating with your story. It just would not shut up.
Yep.
And it's like at some point there was only so much I could do inside a $3 billion company. And when I reached that limit, I'm like, I need to be on my own, because there's more need beyond this organization. And that's what launched Engineering Your Life. Is like, now it's like, and it's finding its own path and its own way. And it's now got a bunch of other aspects to it. But so, yeah, I love what you're doing, and that you're bringing this to the global stage. I'm trying to do my own way with my own vocabulary. I sometimes use really blatant, physics and engineering terms, just because it's fun. It's my personality.
Yeah.
Let's talk. I also I'm looking at the clock, and I realize that I'm going to have to probably start winding down, even though I want to talk for another 2 hours with you about this. But before we leave, I want to talk about plastic and elastic strain, because I thought that was a really powerful intention of your book,
Yeah.
to cause plastic deformation in the readership. I'll hand that over to you, having queued that up.
Yeah. Thanks. Well, and you were in corporate for 25 years, so you experienced this. A flavor of the month comes through, and you go to the training and you get the handouts. And then a month later, you throw the handouts away and you never remember the training. And that happens again and again and again and again. And we would call that, right? Elastic deformation, like a slinky. You can pull it apart and push it back together, right? And it goes back and forth, but it doesn't change. It can move, but it doesn't change. That's most of what happens in corporate environments, is a lot of slightly tweaking things and then snapping back to the status quo. And so in doing this work, I wanted to create ways to help people get through that place of elastic. I don't just want to tweak your thinking for a little while, but you snap back. I want it to be where, even if you go back to driving people, I joke in a lot of my keynotes that you feel at least a little bad and think about next time, maybe you'll drive change. And that means you're partway through that plastic deformation where you're a little bit in a different shape and you'll never quite be the same again. That's what I was hoping to achieve, because what I'm trying to achieve and help people achieve their own goals is change that matters. And too many people forego change that matters because they think the status quo doesn't allow it. And I used the example of Rickover with the nuclear navy. He was just a captain among many advocating for nuclear power. And less than a decade later, Nautilus was underway. And 70 years later, the seas are protected because of his efforts. Or Andy Grove at Intel, driving change, following Gordon Moore and Robert Noyce as they left Fairchild Semiconductor to go to Intel and found it. And Andy just tagging along and then running the company. Because if there was any obstacle in the way of accelerating compute, he was going to alleviate it. And on the stories could go. They achieved wonderful and powerful things because they stumbled on these concepts of driving change. And now if I can give words to that helps other people chart those aspirations, then that's a worthy purpose. And I'm honored to do it.
Well, and it's appreciated, and I'm glad that you are. Also glad that we've run across each other. So I have to thank Hilbert again. I did send him a note this morning saying I'm having a podcast recording today. So delighted. I've met more wonderful people through his influence. And so this has been amazing. I could also sense that this is just, there's way more topics that we could discuss. So at some point, if the opportunity occurs, I would love to have you back on this program to talk about.
Love to come back anytime.
That would be wonderful. Meanwhile, how would people reach you if they wanted to learn more? We will try and transcribe this all into text in the notes, but go ahead and share websites, books, whatever that you would like people to be able to get to.
Yeah. So like I said, you can Google me, April K. Mills, and I will come up as the first result. But if you want to get directly to me, it's april@engineforchange.com. And there's hyphens in there. So it's engine-for-change.com. I'm on LinkedIn. Again, put that K in, April K. Mills, and I should come right up. And on Amazon, the books are available. Everyone's a change agent, like you said, is available paperback, ebook, and audio. And Change Tactics is available in paperback or ebook. So,
okay,
lots of ways to get a hold of me.
I'm just fighting the temptation to ask you about what it was like to record that, but I think we're going to have to do that later so that we don't run any overtime. Meanwhile, this has been amazing having you on this program. I thank you for your time and for your generous sharing and for your contribution to the world becoming a better place, because we do have important problems to solve, changes to create. And I really would recommend, your books to anybody that is attempting to facilitate change, even if it's working for them.
Yeah.
Thank you for being here.
Thank you so much for having me.
Well, again, this is Robert. This is the podcast for Engineering Your Life. Thank you for being here. You can reach more of this work on engineeringyourlife.net. Thanks again, April. Have a wonderful day.